whatever the hell.
Okay, let's
But
go.
for me, it's to do this for you.
We have a treat today.
It's 12 wheels that have to work.
Marty agreed to, for a couple of different reasons, to come up to Ottawa today. Marty is an amazing woodworker. He's also probably one of the best finishers I've ever met. He does amazing, amazing work. Many of you probably already know Marty. For those of you who don't, this is going to be a really great presentation. Anyway, no further noise from me. We'll turn it over to Marty, and he's always entertaining.
Thanks very much, Don. Wow. All right. Well, indeed, it's a pleasure for me to be a presenter at the Ottawa Woodworkers Association monthly meeting, because having been a former member for a lot of years and starting a lot of years back there, I consider it sort of my alma mater. So thanks very much, Don. Thanks very much for offering me the opportunity to come up and do a presentation. And at the end of it, we'll also have another presentation, but we'll hold off on that for right now. Well, first off, make sure you take your cell phone out and you put it to silent mode. I really appreciate that. Because I get distracted so easily and then I'd be off. During and throughout the presentation, if at any time you have a question, just go ahead and ask, okay, please. The objective of me presenting here is to go and convey information that I've gleaned over the years to each and every one of you. And I hope that I won't insult your intelligence by sometimes oversimplifying things. But at the same time, if you don't quite understand it, rather than have to listen to me drone on and on and on a point that doesn't make any sense to you, let's go and clarify it by you so asking. And indeed, I can strongly state, and with considerable conviction, that if one of you has a question, odds are the guy just, a couple of chairs over there has probably the same question, so yes. Okay, so I designed and crafted a cabinet not that long ago. It was late last fall, and I called it Beyond the Box number 3. Anyone who knows me and the woodwork that I do, I like to introduce curves into my work. And I entered a piece in a juried exhibition a number of years ago, and I called it Beyond the Box. And it flopped. I don't even, I won't tell you the 3 judges' names, but they're pretty big name guys, and one of them, who's an American, I asked him, I said, well, what did you think of it? He says, well, the one side curved like this, and the other side curved like that. And immediately I rejected it because they both have to be totally symmetric. And I said, well, did you notice, though, that this one side, it starts narrow at the top and gets wider towards the bottom, and the other side starts wide and it gets narrow? Well, oh my gosh, if I would have known that, I would have been, crushed and such. So, but anyways, Beyond the Box. So after that, I did another piece, a pair of them. It was a pair of corner cabinets for our dining room. And again, I incorporated some interesting curves in it. And my wife, that's her favorite set of cabinets that I've ever done. And then I did this credenza, and because it's got some curves, I thought, what the heck? Let's continue the theme there. I think it's going to be kind of neat. And there it is. And it's not a very good, I don't have really good camera skills and such. And believe you me, it's not lopsided there. It is, of course, the same height. And the curves on the left side and the right side, they're all, both of them are the same. But the curvaceous and exciting part of this particular design for me are the 2 crossing handle sets, because those are actually the handles. And this is the center right drawer, and here it is here, and I'll be passing that around, and I've got a little handle under there so that you can use it to draw it out of the cabinet. So that is the cabinet, and it's made out of cherry, primarily, with the exception of the top and these items here, which are an African mahogany. And the top actually, it really shimmers and it looks really cool. I'm really excited about it there. So this is the steps that I'm going to be following in my presentation. And as you can see, of course, I'm going to be covering pretty well the gamut of how I went about it. And again, any questions, just go ahead and ask them. And there's, of course, another shot of the cabinet itself. Well, everyone approaches furniture making differently. There's no doubt about it. And as far as the first and most important thing in my mind is a piece of furniture has to function. It doesn't matter if it's a chair, a table, or a cabinet, or whatever. It's got to actually do something. It can't just be an art piece. Now, I guess it could be, but as far as I'm concerned, then that's not furniture. That's an art or an artistic piece. And I believe as equally strongly that you have to have function. It's got to have, like a form to it that it helps to express my feelings about what I want to achieve with that piece. So it's got to do something, and it's got to look good to me, anyways. And when I was doing it for a living, I would always, of course, lean on my client to go and get their buy-in from whatever I was going to do, but I would always maintain an artistic license. And I would get them to go and sign that. And that's the respecting your client part, really. Because there's nothing worse, you pour your heart and soul into a piece, and gosh, you spend 250 friggin' hours in the shop, and at the end of it, the person that you're making it for, they really don't like it. Yeah, and such. And the last thing is that every step is important in the process. By that I mean, if you start out with a flunky looking design, no matter how quality of materials you put into it, no matter how good the joinery is, no matter how the prep work for the finishing, and no matter how good the finishing is still, it's not going to get there. And by the same token, making sure that you have good quality hardware for a piece is really important too. And one of the things that I did that was a failure for this cabinet was in the hardware, and I'll explain that. But every step indeed is important. And of course, just another perfect example of that is that if you start out with lumber that's not been properly dried, and then you're trying to mill it, and you just can't ever seem to get it flat or true. And because every time you take a little bit of material, the stresses that are inherent in that board, that section of the lumber, they're relieved a little bit, and then it'll twist or turn or whatever. And so, yeah. So anyways, there's the details, blah, 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 blah. I probably should have gone through this part here. I forgot I had written the detail. But, okay, so just to go back there, suiting the room's decor. They're the second bullet in the form and function. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing nicer than, not only are you making a bespoke piece for someone, but you know exactly where it's going to fit. And in the case of this piece that I did, there were 2 electric plugs on the wall. One was there, one was there. So that kind of gave me a limit as far as the width of the cabinet could be. And you may have a lovely piece of art you want to hang above it, and because of its size or whatever, that may help actually dictate the maximum height that you can have. So anyways, those are just examples there. And of course curves, well, wow. Yeah, budget, respecting your client with regards to budget. Now, if you're making it for yourself, you still have a client, you're it, or your spouse, or whomever, right? And yeah, I mean, lumber is very expensive now. And good quality materials, not just the lumber, but the glue, any fasteners, the elements that all lead to it, the machinery that's involved, the hand tools that are involved, all of those things are expensive. So yeah, for all intents and purposes, money does talk, and talks really loudly, at least it does to me. And every step is important. Haste makes waste. Wow, is that ever the truth? I can't tell you how many times I've made an error when I was tired and or I had to meet a deadline for a piece, and in so doing I had to cut corners. And nothing made me feel worse when I was, trying to do this for pay. Notice I didn't say doing it for a living, because I would have starved to death, I think in many cases. But all that having been said, though, you have to know how to price your work and such. Let's take a look at the designing part of it there. Well, I always start everything out with my sketchbook, and I'm always sketching. I see an idea, or I can see a tree and how a tree grows, or I can see a piece that someone else has made, or, man, I'll tell you, the internet is an absolutely powerful tool. And by the way, I have no idea where AI is going to take us as far as furniture design is concerned. It's gonna be crazy wild. So I always start off with a preliminary sketch, and I will tell you right now, I will unabashedly ask somebody if they mind if I copy parts of their, an element or two out of their design, or the whole thing there. And as long as they understand I'm just doing this for my family and I'm no longer running a business and such, and usually they'll be fine with that in that case there. But that top left one was where it started from. And I saw something a little bit like that, and then the sweeping part that's sort of running diagonally across the three drawers in this sketch, that was in veneer. They had a different color veneer from the wood that the drawers fronts were made of. And then it also went and swept kind of like back over the top, and I thought, whoa, that is really cool. I saw that in England. And then I talked to my wife about the idea of, do you want drawers and a door, like with something in there? And she says, no, I don't want a door at all. And so that kind of like went out the window. And then I thought, well, if I could make that center section proud, and I can sort of incorporate that in as drawer handles there, how would that look? And I didn't like it there. And then I moved on to what I call my secondary series of sketches, and this is kind of like one that I had. But again, I still had in the center part, I had some doors there and such, and my wife really put her foot down, but she said, I kind of like that crossing thing you got going on there. And I said, but you don't like the door handles? She says, no, they look kind of dorky. I don't like that at all there. And so I said, sure. Now, whenever I'm playing around with designs, now I can tell you I do in fact use a CAD program, computer-aided design program. I use Vectric VCarve Pro. Vectric is a British company, and they have, it's a wonderful tool. Is anyone here familiar with the company Vectric? Okay, well, if you're ever going to get into CAD seriously, using, CNC routing systems and such, which I've fallen in love with, you'll stumble across a lot of users using it. And of course, SketchUp is still on the books. I use these battens when I'm physically designing something, though, if I'm going to just be putting it onto a piece of paper. And these two I bought at Lee Valley. These were designed by Michael Fortune, and anyways, he came up with this idea, and he just had a rope joining one end to the other, and he would just pull it tight, and then of course that would give it a flex. And Leonard Lee, who was alive at that time, says, man, there's no way anybody's going to want that, Michael, because it's just not gimmicky enough. Like, it's got to happen. So they came up with a strap idea there. Now, this isn't a Robin Hood bow, but you'll notice that this one here has a completely symmetric arc. And the reason, because these are sail battens, those of you that are sailors. And these ones here, this one here is equidistant. It's exactly the same thickness throughout. So rather than just using a piece of hardwood and doing this, I'd recommend you go and spend just a few bucks that these are. I don't know what they're costing now, but they're very inexpensive, and oh my gosh, I just love them. Even though I do a lot of my design work on a computer, I just love these because you can just physically see, oh, that looks really nice, or no, I don't like that. And you can, of course, change the radius of the arc.
So sorry, where did you get those from?
Lee Valley.
I'll leave it on.
Yeah, and then this one creates an asymmetric curve. And because it's thinner and it slowly tapers to a greater thickness at this other end. And I'll just pass these around, and if you don't have them, my gosh, run out and get them. They're fantastic. And they're better than, just hold on a second, they're better than making one out of a piece of hardwood, because there's a chance that, you know, you can have changing density in the hardwood. Or different grain characteristics that can go and cause it to actually not be as smooth a curve. Yes, sir, you had a question?
Sorry, are there shorter ones for tighter radiuses? Radii?
No, I don't think I think they just come in that one length there. But again, you know, using that concept, you could, you could make them and such there and whatnot. And they're pretty tough, let me tell you. Yeah, they're very, very tough. Okay, so that's one of the things that I do when I'm trying to design something. And of course, I just love the fact that, you know, you can just create a box, and then this side you can just go and pull the center in, and if you pull it right in the middle, it makes a constant arc, and if you pull a little bit more from the bottom, it's an asymmetric curve going like that. And oh, man, it just blows me away just being able to do that. It is so exciting. I just love it, love it, love it. Okay, so, yeah. So making, well, okay. So you've got a really exciting design figured out in your head. Like, oh my gosh, this is like, I'm really happy with this. You can do what some makers do. They actually build all sorts of models to scale and everything else. I usually don't bother doing that. Unless there's a real complex element to it, and I might make a jig to emulate that. Hey, John. I might make a jig or something like that to capture that aspect of it. And as well, I should mention, once I've got my design figured out, I will actually draw it out on a piece of paper, like 100% scale. And especially if it's something complex, because then you can figure out angles and where things got to come in and such. And you can also use that technique to resolve challenges. So as an example, I wanted to go and have the drawer fronts. I'll pass this around. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to see if I could make it so that the frame had its rails, which are the horizontal running members. These are stiles and these are rails. Okay, so the rails, all that I wondered, could I just push the front ones back enough, the thickness of the drawers and the drawer handles, and that would enable me, therefore, to go and have the drawers like inset right in. And so I just did up a sketch, and I think, okay, yeah, sure, that'll work. There's no reason why it won't. I can go ahead and do that. So the carcass, and as you can see that rail there, the bottom rail, and you can't see the top rail. You see how it's set back? So basically what I did was, you can see where there's drawer slides. There's 12 separate drawer slides there, pieces. There's a left and a right, that's 2. So that there's 3 sets of drawers on the left and 3 on the right. And of course the ones on the right are narrower, because that gives it a funky look and pizzazz aspect to it. And then the ones on the left, they're wider. But where those drawer slides are actually fastened to, that's part of the frame. That gives the cabinet some strength. And those pieces that the drawer slides are on there, they actually mortise and tenon into the 4 corner posts. So the ones on the left, they of course, they've got a tenon and a mortise that goes into the front and one in the back leg, and that's what joins those together. So I have a left assembly and a right assembly, and then that center assembly is only there just to go and support the drawer slides, that's all. Whenever you're making furniture, select your drawer slides and any other hardware first, because nothing is more frustrating than you've built a carcass and you just, oh wow, this is like really good. And then you go and build the drawers, assuming that the slides are going to be a certain thickness, because you need to have space for the slides actually on the side or to be undermounted or whatever. And if you don't get that hardware first, and then when it does arrive, it's not going to fit, well, you're going to feel pretty stupid. So not that I've ever done that, of course, but make sure that you get all of your hardware first. Now, I will tell you, and I may as well mention now, those drawer slides, that was the strategic error in this cabinet. And I mentioned budget, so at that time, I had 24 pairs. 24 pairs of drawer slides of exactly that size, and I was going to be using them for some drawers in my workshop. Anyways, it was Christmas was going to be coming up, and I said, you know what, I don't think I can really afford to buy any, but then I remembered, oh, I've got these drawer slides, I'll use them. Well, it's a pretty fine cabinet. And to put kind of, sort of questionable slides on it was kind of, yeah. Although they work perfectly, they work flawlessly, they slide in and out, they don't bind. They're probably going to last as much as a really high quality set of Bloom undermounts would, which are about $50 for pretty well the same thing, if you buy them, on contract there. So anyways, that was a mistake I made. And now you're probably wondering what's, is there any tape or anything on there? This is, I put tape around all of the drawer slides, the part that was attached to the cabinet, so that when I sprayed the finish, I wouldn't get finish on the drawer slides. So that's why that whitish stuff is around there. You're probably wondering why the heck it is there. So anyways, yeah, the construction system method was really, really simple. Basically, I have a front leg, and I have a back leg that's very, very similar. It's a carbon copy of it. And then basically, I'm joining the two. This part here, the inside face is perfectly straight. And as is this inside section here, this is straight, goes straight down. Okay, so basically, I just have some mortises here. I guess put them about here. I just have mortises. So I used my Festool domino to punch some mortises in. Is all that I did, and I used. Oops, that would be right down here. Anyways, wherever the drawer slide is going to be, and then I just went and put there's a board that goes across there to it, and that's basically it there. So there's floating tenons that just fit into those mortises. Now, is everyone familiar with floating tenons? Doesn't know what a floating tenon is? Put your hand up. Okay, yeah. So basically, a mortise and tenon, one of the most widely used joints in the world, okay? So if you have that piece going across, it's called a rail. So anyways, if I could just draw it like this. So here's a rail. Okay, and this is the board before you cut it. And what you're going to do is the board that it's going to fit into, let's say it's right here, okay? You're going to just cut a slot that's about 1/3 the thickness of this. Is it there? And it's going to go into the board. Let's see if the board is there. It's going to notch right in there so that you have sort of like a groove going down, right, sir? And then on this end, what you do is you cut with your saw, you cut away the cheeks of that, so this gets cut off on both sides. And looking at it from the top, then you'll have a tongue, and then here's the edges of the board. It's 3/4 inch or whatever across there. And this tongue then will slide into that slot. The slot itself is called the mortise. And the other part, the tongue, is called the tenon, T-E-N-O-N. So the tenon fits in, and there's a couple of different types of, there's haunched and there's all sorts of them. But anyways, so when you're making, to make it simpler, instead of having to calculate how long am I gonna have, how long is that tongue gonna be on both ends and everything else, just don't even bother. Just cut it to the length that you want that fits between the inside face of this and the inside face of this one. You just measure that, and let's say it's 16 inches in length. You just make these 16 inches in length, and then you cut a slot in here and there, and then you'd also put another, you're gonna cut a slot in here as well in the end. And then your tongue is just going to be a freestanding piece of wood that's going to be the same size as what this tongue would have been if you were going to machine into that piece. But it just, you just glue it and it just slides in. And so it slides into about the halfway point minus a little bit, because you have to leave some space at the bottom for some glue to compress into. And then because you've got half of it sticking out, then you push your rail into it, with glue on it, and then you just clamp it. And so those are called floating tenons. So this is a floating tenon, and so that requires you to make these slots, the mortises in both that and the piece that's going to fit into it.
And why didn't you use dominoes, which are floating tenons?
Yeah, well, I did.
I know, but for those as well?
Yeah.
Oh,
I
so
use
you
domino.
just use dominoes everywhere? Okay.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
So for those of you that don't know what a domino is, it's not a Catholic thing. Domino nobiscus, it's not that at all. What it is there's Festool designed a machine that cuts those slots, those mortises. And basically it's got a mill, which is kind of like a router bit, and it spins it around real fast, and at the same time it's got an element to it that moves it up and down. And as it moves up and down and you push it ahead, it cuts the slot. It cuts that mortise for you. And the corners will be rounded.
Yeah. It cuts your bank account too, eh?
Yeah, but if you're doing it for a living though, by times the money. So anyways, yeah, it cuts this slot, and it's rounded at the corners. And then Festool also sells the floating tenon part, which a lot of people call the domino. And those just fit right into there. They're made out of compressed beech, and so when you insert them, they're very strong and they'll hold up. And Festool makes two variants of the Festool domino, the 500 series, which is the original one that I own, and the 700 series, which makes larger slots, larger mortises, which would be appropriate for strong joints where maybe a chair or things such as that. Okay, so that's that. So that's the main part of the framing, really. They just went across there, and then this one here went across there. And the edge of these were equidistant with the front of that. And that gave me the strength that I needed. And the panel just slid into a slot that I milled with my CNC that curved. And on the inside there was one. And so basically that panel fit there. So the panel was on the outside, and then the framing is on the inside. And that's what gave it the strength.
The panel was flexible?
The panel was not flexible, but before I assembled it, I went and put my my rails across, my 3 rails across, then I slid the panel into that side, then I pushed everything in from the other side. Yes.
Was the panel solid wood or plywood?
It was a shop-made panel
Okay.
out of
great.
flexible plywood, bending plywood, and
Okay.
veneers.
Yeah, because I was wondering if you were using loose tenons to allow for expansion of the panel if it was
No.
solid wood.
No, but I would have to do something like that if it was made of solid wood. Good point. Okay, so it's a shop-made veneer, shop-made
Gotcha.
plywood, pardon me. Okay, so
But-
frame
sorry,
within the
the-
gables.
The sides are straight though?
The
Or do they
front of
follow
it,
the
the
outside
front
curve?
of it is. And
No,
then
I'm sorry,
back
the
curves.
panel.
Yeah, exactly. So there you can see, I mean, so those, the front legs, the inside of them are straight, and the back legs are an exact carbon copy with the exception that the joints are all cut on the inside.
But the
Facing-
panels are curved.
Oh, yeah, the panel's curved, and I'll be showing you, this is the vacuum veneer press mold that I made to go and generate those. Yes, sir.
Did you glue the panel, or is it just relying on the domino and tenons?
It's not, the panel is glued into place
It is
solidly
itself.
into the slot that was milled, that it was exactly the same thickness that they were, okay? So the front rails are inset, so by that I mean the front rails, those horizontal members, they're actually inset the full, pretty well the full width of that leg. And because I had these styles, I could go and put this rail anywhere I wanted along there. It wouldn't matter where it was. You know, but I wanted to have it so that it acts as a stop for the drawer fronts as well, right? Okay, so I used mortise and floating tenons, as I said, so if you want to call them dominoes, because I used my festool domino to make the mortises, you can call it that. And one thing I should mention is that the festool domino model 500 is the smaller of the 2 machines. And why is that important? Well, because I often like to have multiple tenons for additional strength. So what I actually did was, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this is about the size of, that's the cross section of those members that go where the drawer slides are. And if I'm not mistaken, I have 4
Wow.
in each of them. And what I did is I set my 500 to the widest setting. Now remember I said that the festool domino, the way it works is this bit spins around like a little banshee. And it goes up and down, and you can adjust how far it'll go up and down with a dial on the machine. So when you set it to its widest width, it's fairly wide. But festool does not make dominoes that will fit that extra width, so I make them myself. So what I'll do is I'll measure. Now I can't remember, but I think I used the 10 millimeter wide one. So that slot is, I'll make a great big one of it. So it's 10 mil across. Okay, and so anyways, if you have it at its widest setting, the 10 millimeter domino fits into about here. And the reason they do that is that if you're in an area where you want to have it so it can expand and contract, then that's a good thing to have. But when you want tight joints, that's not a good thing to have. So what I do is I went and set it to the widest setting, and I just plunged it into a piece of scrap. And then I took my micrometer and I measured how long that was, what the distance was from there to there. And then I knew that these were approximately 10 millimeters thick, so I just took a bunch of stock. I had some cherry and oak and maple, I guess, kicking around, and so I just milled a whole whack of it. And I left them there, whatever thickness the board was, whatever width it was and whatever length, I didn't care. So I just went and used my bandsaw, and I ripped them to about 11.5 millimeters, and then I went and ran it through my planer and took a little bit off. And then I put my drum sander, I've got a good quality drum sander, and I took off the final bit. And then I used my micrometer and I measured, and I'm really particular about my joinery, and I said, that's just the perfect width to go and fit in there snugly, but not crazy tight, so that once the glue would expand that wood, then it would be too tight. I'd never get it together, so I did that. And then I went and measured the length from there to there, and that's what I cut my stock to. And I left the edges square at first, and then I just got a router bit. I just took my router bit and I put it into my shaper. I've got a shaper. I don't have a router table in my shop anymore. I've got a shaper that I can put the collet needed to go and hold 1/2-inch router bits. And so then what I did in that case, then I just used a round over bit and I rounded over these 4 corners. And then I had this stock that was 3 or 4 feet in length, and then whenever I need it, then I just cut off whatever I need.
The shaper turns fast enough to use router bits?
Adequately.
Okay.
And when you're using larger bits, like most of my bits, they're about that big around. And so, you know, and the larger the diameter, the less tear out you're going to have as well, because the angle of attack of a larger diameter is more effective than the really small diameter, you know, because, you know, there's a greater chance it's going to take off a chunk right off the bat. Anyways, we're getting off topic here. But the bottom line is, I wanted to have maximum joinery strength, so I used 4 dominoes, 4 tenons in there, and I made sure that they were as big as I could possibly get them with the machine that I had. So that's why I did it that way. And with 4 of them at every one of these, at this end and at the other end, each of those 2 gables, those are called gables. You know, you have a left gable on a cabinet, a right gable on the other side of the cabinet. So those gables are rock solid, strong. Okay. And the drawer slide support, then I use side mounts, and they require that particular style of drawer slide is real simple. You know, you just have a board there and just fasten it to it, and away you go.
I think it's a rail. I think it's a rail because you have to put 2 mortises in each, within that width.
Yeah.
And you said.
Well, you don't have to, but I did, because I wanted lots of strength.
So.
And I'll
How
see,
did that
I tell you
measure?
what, I get on Instagram quite a bit, and I will see professionals making framing. And so here's the one piece, and then here's another piece going into there, and they'll have one, and it's just a small one, and it doesn't even, I mean, and I'm looking at it and I'm thinking to myself, boy, they're really relying on the glue contact here to provide the strength, because that tenon is not very large. But when you add the strength of all of those tenons together and the glue surface area, it's pretty substantial. Yes, sir.
Trying to do that with dowels and a dowel jig to help
Sure.
you along.
Absolutely.
Would that take substantially longer because of the kind of alignment and setup from the domino, or is it just kind of like?
Well, I'll tell you
doable?
what, if you have there's a couple of really good doweling jigs on the market, and if you have one of those, there's no reason why you can't make really strong joints relatively quickly. Now, the Festool domino really accelerates things.
Yeah.
And when you have it set up really correctly and accurately, there's a little sliding window that you can move just a tad if things aren't lined up perfectly. But once that's there, I wear a magnifying glass over
Okay.
top. My safety glasses, actually, they're a magnifying glass as well, and so I just put them on there. Those goofy looking German things there.
You just don't look into the sun, I guess?
So anyways, the idea is that then you can see precisely. And another thing is, in your shop, ensure that you have really strong lighting. And the older you get, the dimmer those lights get. It's one of these things, like the floor gets further away from me all the time and such. But the bottom line, quite simply, being if you have good lighting and if you have good eyewear. And you can see where you need to put it. It doesn't matter. And dowels are a really strong joinery system. They're kind of like a floating tenon, really.
That's what I was kind
You
of
know,
thinking,
it's
yeah.
the same concept, really. And so, you know, but by the way, don't think that you can use just straight biscuits. So if you think you can make as strong a joint using a biscuit joiner and get those strong enough there, you probably can't. It may fail. You have to have multiple.
They're just for alignment.
They're for alignment, but for just general carcass construction, which is what they were designed for, they're wonderful. And they're very, very good. But remember, they're not very long. But at the same time, if all that you're using them for, and this is what they're designed for, they're designed so that you've got plywood or thin materials there. And so this is a gable. And here you have the base of your cabinet. And where those two meet, right there, there's not a lot of, this is pretty small. You know, like if you're using MDF or whatever, you know, that's 5/8 inch. And so the joint that's going to go into there, you know, and then into this, I mean, this is only 5/8 of an inch thick, so you can't have anything that goes very deep anyways. So if you just want to do just a general cabinet construction, like for kitchen cabinetry, they're perfect for that. And that's what they were really designed for back in Switzerland years and years ago. Okay, so that was that part. And then the gables, again, the sides then. So what I did was I used my computer and I said, this is the exact curve that I want. That's what I want, baby. So what I did, so there's the exact curve right there. Well, it's actually, so for the right-hand side one, this is the exact curve. And can I have a show of hands? Who has done vacuum veneering here? Okay, a few of you. Okay, so the way it works really, and it's so slick to make your own curved panels. Oh my gosh, I love it. So the way it works is you figure out what curve you want. Okay, so let's say this is exactly the curve that I want to emulate. I want that to be on that curve exactly. And you can go and program that into your computer. And then you can go and take your computer numeric controlled routing system and you can cut exactly that. Okay? It'll duplicate it 1,000,000 times, 50 bazillion times, whatever number of times you want to replicate that, it'll be exactly the same. And with a keystroke, you can flip it so that you can see, I want to see what the other side is. You know, then you'll have two that are exactly the same, but just opposite each other. Okay, so this then is the right-hand side panel. And let's say this is so that's the panel itself then. So what you do is, if I took and I made a mold, and the mold was that exact shape, the top of the mold is going to dictate what the inside of that panel is that's being glued onto it. So the panels are comprised of a very flexible inner plywood, and the plywood is made, it's usually about 1/4 of an inch. It's all in metric. It can be 4 mil, 5 or 6 or 7 or whatever, and the manufacturer will go and provide it. And those pieces of flexible plywood can flex only in one direction because of how it's made. So what they do is they get a really thin piece of veneer, and that is their center core. And then, you know, plywood, every layer is 90 degrees to the next, right? So then that's really thin. It's about 1/50th of an inch in thickness. That's how thin it is. And then to that, then they take a piece of veneer that's thicker, and it's usually made of poplar or some wood like that. And the grain is running that way. And then they put another one on the other side, exactly the same. And again, the grain is running that way. And the center one, the grain is running this way. And then they put glue between the two of them, those three pieces, and they glue them together. And they create what's called wiggle wood. Then they run it through a set of drums, and the drums have knives in them that poke through, they poke down about 2/3 of the way. And those cuts there's all sorts of them. So that makes that even more flexible. So that plywood, that'll bend over anything. It'll take this bend, no problem at all. I mean, like, it's just like it's falling off. Can everybody see that? And this is
Super
actually the
expensive.
top end. I've got it set on this end so that it's good. So what you have to do is you figure out what exact curve do I want the inside to be. And then what you do is then you figure, okay, to create these molds, the molds are made out of, as a general rule of thumb, MDF. So here you can see the MDF here. The base is MDF. And you see this cut out here, kind of like a bulkhead of a ship? I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of them in that piece. And those were, the first one I cut on the computer, cut on my milling machine, on my CNC router. And then the other ones I just bandsawed them out roughly, and then I just stuck them to the first one and ran them through my pattern making router bit. So I duplicated them, so I had 7. Okay? And before I did that, I measured how thick this wiggle wood was, because I had to factor the width of that into the shape, right? Because as soon as you add something to it, like it's
slightly different radius.
it's slightly different radius. So you factor that in, and on the computer, you know how simple that is? Like, and it just moves everything over. And then I went and I took this one piece of MDF. You see, I've got a bunch of holes drilled in it. That's to allow the air to escape in the vacuum veneer press. Okay, and there you can see I had screw holes. I put screws in there to just give it strength. Glued it all up, and then that created that. Then I just took this bending plywood. I cut it very, very squarely on my table saw. I've got a slider, Felder slider, 9-foot slider, and let me tell you, baby, when you put that on there, it's 90 degrees. It's not 89.997 or whatever, it's 90 degrees. So anyways, I put that on. I actually made a little bit oversized, put it on, glued it down, and basically I just nailed it. I just started here and I just went all the way down there, and I had some clamps with some cawls across it first, and I just put her in there, and then I just took my router and I went zim, 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 so that it was all even. Then I went and put some tape on it. This is just packing tape so that the glue wouldn't stick to it. So you have to go and figure out what's your exact outer curve. Then you calculate the thickness of that, and you subtract that from the curve that you're going to be cutting out. Yes, John?
What program are you using, Marty?
Vectric V-Carve Pro. Vectric's a British company. They probably, in the artisan level, not the commercial cabinet shop, artisan level, they're it.
Because of all the processes that go into making it, is that wiggle wood really expensive? Like the forming plywood?
Boy, it's been quite a while since I purchased some, because I bought about 20 sheets about 5 or 6 years ago. And I only use it to make molds. And sometimes your mold, if you have a really large mold, you may need to have 2 or 3 pieces. And again, you factor in that thickness into whatever the radius here to make sure things are all duplicated exactly. So I don't know. It's been a long time. I think I bought it from Robert Burry many, many years ago. And by the way, I did a project one time where I had to have it really thin. I had to have the panels come out to a very specific width thickness when it was all said and done. And so I actually ran them under my drum sander to go and make them thinner so that I could get them just right. They didn't have any thin stuff at that time there. Michael Fortune and a lot of other designers, they simply use really thin wood, like about, about 1/8 of an inch thick birch plywood, 3-ply plywood there and such. It doesn't matter what you use, but you have to have it strong enough, because when you put this into your veneer press and put the pressure on, you're getting about 10 pounds per square inch pressure. I mean, true atmospheric pressure, what is it, 12.8 or something. But anyways, I mean, you figure out, like how many square inches you got, you multiply that by 10. You've got thousands and thousands of pounds of pressure that's pushing down. So if your mold's not supported, you're going to have waves in it, and those waves are going to be duplicated onto your curved panels. So that's why it's critical that it be just right. Anyways, I didn't want to really get this going into a diatribe on how to make molds and such, but I want you to appreciate that there's more that goes into this than just, like getting a sail bat and then bending it and saying, yeah, that's what I want. And magically you go like this and the cabinet churns out the other side, So anyways, then you want to figure out, okay, well, how thick do I want that to be? And that dictates then how many pieces of this bending plywood are you going to have, and how many veneers you're going to have, because the veneer that I used on the outside of the gable those were going to be really nice pieces of cherry veneer, solid wood cherry veneer. And the stuff that's on the inside, who sees that, who cares? And such. So I actually have some, what's called, I'm not sure exactly what it's a craft paper, is all that it is, with glue in it there. And it has really flexible, and it's about the same thickness as really thick wooden veneer. And veneer nowadays is between 1/100th of an inch and about maybe 2/100ths, 1/50th of an inch in thickness. That's commercial veneers. Okay, so like thin, thin, thin. And so when you're starting to sand these things, you better make sure you've got, like, oh, I don't want to, you're not going to start out with 80 grit or 40 grit. Okay, so anyways, I figured out how thick I wanted to have them, and knowing as well that the gables, the curved panels that were going to be inset into there, were not really there for much more than a little bit of strength. I don't want to have it set if somebody pushes on it, it's going to flex much. So they were probably only about just under 1/2 of an inch thick. And in fact, I can show you exactly how thick they were. Okay, so this is what my computer did. I did a test. So after I'd made the panel, this is how thick it was, and I'm looking at it, and it's much less than 1/2 of an inch. But anyways, I'll pass this around. So this outer cut here, the inside part there, is what the leg ended up being. That's exactly how thick the legs are. That's exactly it. That's how thick, tall, and everything they are. And this slot then, I told my computer I wanted this slot to be the same curve as the outside of the leg was going to be cut to. I said, that's what I want to have, that shape. And I used my micrometer after my panels came out of the vacuum veneer press. I measured how thick they were using my micrometer, and then I told the computer, that's how thick I want you to mill that slot. And so that's how I did it. And so all 4 legs were done like that, except the inside, the front ones are both the same, but the back ones, it's all flipped around. Again, with a computer, you go boop, and it just flips it around. Very, very cool. Okay, so making the mold and what are the considerations? I pretty well covered that to death. Mating the gable panels to the carcass. Now, there's a couple of different methods you could use. Somebody said, I forget who it was, he asked about using the domino to go in and cut those, to adjoin them, to adjoin the panels. Myself, I much prefer to go and have a slot. So this is just a dado slot, but it's curved, okay? So it's just a dado slot, and it's slotted down into there. And on the, this was just a test, and I think on the real one, I made them about 3/4 of an inch deep. So they're fairly deep, and so that would add to it. Now, I'll tell you how precise those machines are when it mills this material. I took my micrometer and I measured it, and I said to the thing, I want to have it 1/2 millimeter thicker, so that when I put the panel in, I'd be able to slide it in. So it's 1/2 millimeter. The slot's 1/2 millimeter thicker than the thickness of that panel. And I just don't have a measuring device accurate enough to be able to go and see if it really came out that way. But I did two. I had one that was exactly bang on, the other one was just that 1/2 mil. And the one that was bang on, the only way I could get it in would be bang on. And the other one, like it was okay, it just went right in there. And again, like, so the curve, I can dictate how accurately the veneer will be when it's, the panel will be when it comes off here. There's a tiny bit of spring back, but the panel was so narrow it wouldn't have mattered much. And you can minimize spring back by using glues that do not have what they call creep. So if you use the standard PVA glue to glue up curved panels, what happens is that the glue itself really does not form a really rock hard joint. There's some movement in it. So when you're selecting your glue for making curved panels, the more curves you've got in it, and the thicker it is, and the more layers you have to build up, the more rigid the glue lines have to be that are produced. So you need to use maybe an epoxy in some cases, which I hate to use. Or there's some urea glues that will do it. And some of my friends have told me that they've gone to using Gorilla polyester glues, polyurethane glues, because they have a urea product in it. I don't think they have much formaldehyde compared to the old ones. The old ones by a company called Weldwood. You used to have a powder and you'd mix it with water. And there's an American company, I think you can get it through joewoodworker.com, and you can get a powdered, and they call it PPR, I believe, and that's quite carcinogenic, and I don't think you can import it into Canada. But I go down to the States for about 3 months every winter, and I usually order all sorts of crap, stuff I know I can't, but I'm using small amounts, and I'm not reselling it and such, so I don't care. Okay. So mating the gable panel to the carcass, that's a method that I chose. I'll come back and maybe next year and I'll show you how you can use your festool domino to mate curved panels to curved frames. Pretty exciting. But I won't cover it now, it's too lengthy. Well, okay, the drawers, man, look, a drawer box is a drawer box. Mine are all made of poplar. And that's a standard wood that I use for the two sides, the front and the back. And these are an applied front box, so it's kind of, that really simplifies things, and I'll tell you why in a bit here. So anyways, I've got a Lee Dovetail jig, L-E-I-G-H, not L-E-E, that I bought, I'll bet it's 30, maybe 35 years ago, and I still use it to this day, and it makes them pretty accurately. There's 1 or 2 gaps there I noticed in the part of the box at the back. I didn't really worry too much about that. And I just use standard PVA glue to glue.
I was going to ask about those gaps. Were
Yeah.
they intentional for the movement? Or
Yeah, the answer is yes, they were. Right.
Let the joy breathe.
They were intentionally, that box, when I finished it, I intentionally put that and to the inside where it would never be seen. Because these drawer slides, they come out about 90%, you know, they're a full extension. Well, they're not quite full extension, so nobody would see that unless I brought it. And by the way, I purposely brought the worst one so that you'd see that shit happens. You know, that's all there is to it. Okay, so if I was concerned about that, what would I do? What I would do is I would take slivers of wood and I would make sure that here's the dovetail. I'll make it really big for you. Okay, so there's the dovetail, okay, that I've got to fit into. And let's say that there's a small amount, there's a sliver like that, okay? Where this just doesn't, there's a slot in there. So what you do is you figure out which way is the wood grain running. So if the wood grain is running across on this part, if it's running across, then you have to make sure that the sliver that you use, the grain is running in that same direction as well. Because if you just put in a piece where the grain is running, you know, it's running that way, and everything else is going, you know, up and down, that's gonna look like heck. So then you have to make sure you orient it the right direction there. So you make it in a little bit of a taper. This is where hand tools come out really nicely. You can mill stuff on a planer or jointer or whatever until you get it really close. Then you just take your hand plane and a couple of sweeps there, and maybe you want to have it tapered a little bit, and just go ahead and do that. Then you just put some glue in there, put some tape on each side before you put your glue in. And then you just go and put the glue on the wedge and, you know, stick some into there. Sometimes you can take compressed air with a low air setting and blow the glue in further into the slot. And then you just push the thing in and just tap it into place. And then let it dry for 15-20 minutes, and then just go and cut it off with your chisel or a saw, you know, and then hand plane it off. And boy, it'd be really hard to tell. You know, select a board that's got the same grain, same colorations, you know, you won't be able to tell. Okay, applied drawer fronts. Well, I'll tell you why I did it that way, why I have applied ones. Okay, so this is the kind of like the history, if I can call it that, of what I was going to do. So I thought at first, you know what? Wow, this is neat. I've got my CNC. So this is the right-hand side. Let's say this was the right-hand side. I don't know where it was when I was first designing it. Anyways, so this is one side. And so what I said, you know, because there's a left and right side. So what I said, oh, that's going to be simple. I've got my drawers. There's the upper one. This is the middle one. And then the bottom one's got it does have a really, really tall face to it, which lends itself to some warpage. Okay, but anyways, so what I did then is I said, okay, well fine, there's going to be the drawer front. And so the thing that's going to be really neat about this is I can just simply inset a piece of solid wood into there. And then I thought about it, oh, hold it, Marty. The grain is going to be running this way with all the drawer fronts. And I'm going to take a piece of wood that's the grain's running this way, and I'm going to inset it in there. And I'm not going to have any problems? Ooh, that's not going to work. So then I said, okay, so what I have to do then is the drawer front pieces, I'll just pass them around here. Drawer front pieces are going to have to be screwed on from the back, and I'm going to elongate the screw holes in the front face of the drawer boxes, so that they'll fit in there and they'll stay lined up fairly well. And because they've got some movement ability, they're not going to split the drawer faces. So that's how I did it. Now, to make those curves, what I did is I just programmed it into my CNC, and I used the design. I thought, you know, at first I had it like this, and then I flipped this one up, and then I put this down, and I figured out where would I have them cross and such. And I did that before I actually made the framing of the cabinet. And so I figured out exactly where I had to it. And with this computer program, you can go and say, what's the distance from there to there? You go click, zip, boom, and it'll tell you within 1/100th of a millimeter. And let me tell you, 1/100th of a millimeter is accurate enough for anything I'm gonna make, you know. It's probably not accurate enough for the space shuttle, but it's accurate enough for a credenza. And so that was the neat thing was about it. And then what I did is, as you can see, I went and cut templates out, 5/8 inch, or I guess that's 3/4 inch, I don't know, MDF. And then I just went and took those pieces of wood and I oriented them as best I could. And, because I wanted to have the grain running, you know, as accurately as I could. Because every time, you know, you go across the grain, you lose strength. You know what I mean? Am I explaining that well? You know, if you take a board, let's say that this is the board, okay? You take it, and the grain is running straight, right? And so the more exaggerated, the more curved that piece is, then you don't have a lot of strength in this area because that could break off because of the way the grain is actually going to go. You're going against the grain, you're cutting curves, right? And so I tried to limit that by orienting the boards as best I could. So these were just some tests that I did. So basically I just made these and I just set this onto the board so I got the best orientation. And this is just half of one of them. So anyways, this was just a test. And so I just oriented it so that I had the best grain alignment. Then I just drew some lines around that and I cut it out in the bandsaw. Then I just two-sided tape, glued them together, stuck them together, and then I just, you know, I had bandsawed outside of the line by about 1/8 of an inch, and then I just used my pattern maker's bit, and I just duplicated them. And I did it that way rather than putting it on my CNC because I have a small CNC. It's got a 31 inch by 31 inch maximum size, and I just thought, you know, that's too complicated, I'll just do it this way, and that's what I did.
I'm wondering if, because, okay, I understand that the wood expand and contract like this for the drawers,
Yeah.
but these are just relatively small boards which would be screwed from the back at different places.
Yeah.
Even, I don't think that even if you had not left, you had not elongated the holes, I don't think it would have.
It may not have.
cracked the
This
wood.
one here, look at how tall this drawer is. Goes right to me. The bottom is also asymmetrically curved, and that's
You know
quite
what?
a distance to.
Yeah, but
for
say
it to cover.
it's screwed here
Yeah.
and here and here,
Yeah.
okay? Like it will expand and contract here, but
Mhm.
I don't know if just
Well, I
for
wasn't
the-
willing to take
for
a
the-
chance.
Yeah.
I guess that's the way, I mean, like,
Yeah,
how long does it take to elongate a screw hole?
yeah,
How long does it take to take off a drawer front,
yeah.
glue that split together, you know, open the split up, you know, get glue into it, and then reclamp it, clean up it up, and then you've buggered up the finish, and then you've gotta fix it and so on, so yeah. So, you know, you have to be a little prudent there. And especially, like, if I would have trapped it by cutting a
Oh, yeah, well,
slot,
it's a different story.
Oh.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
then doesn't matter, then you can't have anything like that. Okie dokie. And so that's how I did that. Well, okay, so after I had figured out the curves and everything I want, and then I had my handles, what I did is I took the boards and I had this, the whole front. I'll do that now. I'll show you, because this is really slick, how I did this. So, first thing that I did was, I knew exactly how wide the drawers, the whole cabinet was, okay? Remember I said the inside edges are square, so basically, I've got a rectangle. And so I just said, okay, so I want to make this out of cherry, so I just picked enough cherry boards so that I went right across. And I have about, I don't know, about 6 or maybe 5 or 6 boards that cover that whole height. And it's about that tall, so there's, you know. So anyways, then I glued them all up, and I took a look at the grain orientation and such, and I know some guys, every second one you flip and such, I don't believe that. I don't subscribe to that method. I do it for appearance. Okay? So if I have one board and if it was flipped, you know, theoretically give me the exact, you know, orientation so that it will never work, would always work, so that it will never work, then I would sacrifice, to do that, maybe to give it that characteristic, then I'm sacrificing the aesthetic, the beauty of it. So in my case, and that's one area where function and form, function gets thrown out and form takes
But
priority.
already you have your brace anyway that will help keeping it
Remember,
straight.
these are fastened to the front of a drawer. There's 4 screws in each drawer face.
Still helps.
They're not gonna go anywhere. Yeah, very little. Okay, so anyways, that's what I did. Then, I can't even remember which way the arcs went. Let's see here. I don't wanna show you that. That's really important. Okay, I'm gonna just go back a couple. Okay, there you go. I want to see, okay, so anyways, so they start up, I wanted them to go from corner to corner, so it went here to there, and then this one here, I didn't quite go like that, but anyways, this would be close enough. And they get thicker as they go down here, and then this one here went the exact opposite there. And it had to cross right where the drawers were going to change. Okay, so let's say that's what it was. So anyways, what I did, and of course, I forget which one took precedence, but regardless though, so, and the cut was gonna be right through there, let's say. So I got this a little off kilter, but you get the idea. So what I did is I just figured out, I knew exactly where I wanted to cut. So this one here would be here, and this one here would be there. Let's say that's what it was. This one here was actually up a little bit higher, but anyways, okay, so it was there. That's where I was gonna cut across, there, and then I was just gonna cut right down the center of that. So I'd have my left and right drawers, and I had everything set there. Honest to gosh, I took this whole thing, these were screwed into position. These were already screwed in. I took them to my slider, and I went, cut right through everything. Boom, right through everything. Boom, right through everything. That's how I created 6 drawer fronts. Okay, that's how I did it. So the saw kerf, which is about 1/8 of an inch thick, that's how wide that space is between the drawers. And I'll tell you, that's actually wider than what looks really good. What looks really good is like, you know, a little bit more than a 1/16, but not an 1/8 kind of thing. Well, anyways, so that's how I did it. And then I made sure that my drawer boxes were you know, I think they had to accommodate the 1/2 inch. They had to be a 1/2 inch because the drawer slides themselves were 1/2 of an inch thick. Okay. And then, so the other drawer slide would be here minus the framing. You know, you had to do a lot of calculation to make sure that the drawer boxes were the right size. They could be a little bit narrower, and it wouldn't matter, except that your slides then wouldn't line up. So there's a lot of, you know, like, how am I going to do this, and calculations and such to get it just right. But that's how I made the drawer fronts.
Did you have any tear out thrown through the saw?
Not very much. I've got some really sharp blades. And my saw is really, it's absolutely precise.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, yes, that's how I did it there. And that, it worked out really, really well for me.
It's maybe a stupid question, but
Oh, I doubt if it is.
do people ever make wooden drawer slides anymore? 'Cause like
Oh,
in old-
sure,
yeah.
lots of people do, yeah. For really fine you know, when I was first getting into it 35, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, wood on wood slides were the hallmark of quality. And to a certain extent, some people still feel that same thing. You know, they use quarter sawn materials only. you know, and they make them, you know, they mill them, and you can have full extension slides. I've got a book, it was done in Germany, and there was about 6 or 7 pieces of furniture in there, and they are the pieces that individuals had to do who were aspiring to become journeymen in Germany. And they were following the process, you know, the 7-year apprenticeship process. And this one guy, they were made out of fir, Douglas fir. And it was perfectly quarter sawn material, and they were only about maybe, I can't remember how thick, they were probably a little bit more than a ½ an inch thick, and he had full extensions.
I was gonna
And
say.
they would just
how
go
far-
click, click and such, yeah, so, but that's precise work. And having the right materials and such, I would never do that nowadays. I wrote a magazine article for Canadian Woodworking many years ago, and in there, I talked about hardware. And 90% of the cabinetry that I do, I'll have full extension, undermount, Blum floor slides. Soft close, you know, really nice stuff. Okay, good. So that's, now the top, okay, so African mahogany, and I like that because of the chatoyance you get. Chatoyance is the characteristic of when light hits surfaces that refract the light at different angles, depending on how you're looking at it. That's what chatoyance is. And it exhibits itself in any wood that's got like grains that move, like burls and woods like that, you know, woods that grow like that. And it has nothing to do with the species of the material, because you can have poplar, you can get a crotch that in a poplar tree that exhibits that characteristic because of the way it all interwound and all ground up together as it was growing. But anyways, this African mahogany, holy man, it really, I mean, it just shimmers, it's just so beautiful. So that's why I wanted to use it. And I thought, well, I was going to make the drawer handles out of the same material, even though if you look at them, from a distance it looks the same as the stained cherry. Looks the
Yeah,
same.
I'm surprised that you finished it exactly, they're the same color exactly. I would
Yeah.
have kind of
My
contrasted
client, the boss said, I wanted to do it in black with a gold edge. I thought, that's gonna look really cool, and my boss said, it's not gonna happen, so, okay. So, but I use what I call my signature edge profile. Geez, I'm a legend in my own mind. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Okay, so the top is actually, it's rectangular, okay? So here's the top. And I tried to find the piece of wood that I used for it. So anyways, you know, I mean, routers. A router's a fantastic machine for giving you different edge profiles. So let's say that you've got an edge here. Here's a piece of wood, and you're looking at it from this side. And that's about how thick the top actually is. So you can go and take a router that's going to give you a chamfer. Everybody knows what a chamfer is? It's a 45-degree angle usually. It doesn't have to be 45, but that's what actually is often cited. So anyways, if you just take your router with a ball bearing on it, with a given radius, you're going to, so here's the ball bearing is going to be right here, and then you've got the shank of your router bit here, and then you've got the actual cutting parts are here. And so anyways, this angle is already predestined in the router bit itself. Okay? And you can have Roman ogee shape, you can have a cove, you can have, a round over, et cetera there. And so that's what the starting point is. Now, can you imagine how friggin' boring it would be if that thing was just routed all the way across, all the way around? There, not me. So what I like to do is I like to have it so that it is cutting deeper at the ends than it's cutting in the center. Okay? And so that gives you this effect. And then you do it on this edge here as well, of course. And so anyways, when you look at it, the edge then looks like, it's actually routed like this. It's deeper here. It cuts deeper and cuts more material off, you know, like here, and here, and here. And I find it almost tricks your eye into thinking it's curved. It's got a curve to it. So this sort of follows up the whole concept of curves are better, baby. So how do you do that? Well, if you had a straight edge, let's say that you put down a board there that's perfectly straight, or you don't even put a board out at all, and you just use your router bit and the ball bearings there, and it just flows right along there. This is all going to be the same thickness. That 45-degree chamfer goes right across. That might look okay, but no, I want to bring it up a notch. So what I do basically is I figure out how much of a curve I want. And again, this is an example where I can use the sail batten. I'll use the green one that has just like a constant curve to it, and I just set it on there, and then I measure from the edge to where I'd like to have it go out. How much is that? Let's say that is 1 inch. Just say that's 1 inch. And so that you'll have the same rise on the other side. So all that I do really is I just take a board, and I of course throw it on my CNC, and I just say, give me that arc, and go, and it cuts it. No reason why, for years and years and years and years until I got into CNCing, I would just do that. I would take that sail bat and I would lay it down, I would draw a line on it, take it to the bandsaw, and then I'd go and I'd just take my my rasps. I have some really lovely old pattern makers rasps, and I would just mark it and I would just feel it. Close your eyes and feel it. That feels fair. It feels really nice. I wouldn't worry if the left side was exactly the same as the right. It just felt good and it looked good. And then I'd lay it on there and I'd measure it, and it's close enough. That's really, my eye won't see the difference. Then you figure out the distance. Here's your router base, and here's that bit. Here's where it's cutting, okay? And I remove the ball bearing. I don't have ball bearings on mine. In fact, I just grind them off. So that's just ground off. So all you have is the carbide cutter, really. And then I have to make sure that this is tall enough to give me the distance that I want to mill down to and across. And then I just take that curved board and I measure the distance from here to there, and that's where I'll set the edge there so I can get just what I need. And I just move that board back the distance of the radius here, whatever this amount is. Not the true radius, but it's the distance from the inside of where it's cutting to there. And actually I'll usually measure it just a little bit further down, so I'm actually getting some cutting in. I put that on there. I just clamp it in place. I put my router right against there, and I just go zhoosh. And sometimes, I've miscalculated. So I set it so that it's just barely cutting. And then I'll just move it slowly, and I draw reference lines there to make sure I've got that lined up properly. So that's how I do it there. So it gives you the illusion of it cutting deeper on the edges at the ends than in the central area there. And it's a nice smooth arc, and I find it really looks really pretty. It's quite impressive. That's how I do that. And I don't know, is that one of my signature things? Yeah, it actually is. Ken Dixon borrowed the idea from me. And I was very proud that he did so. I gave a presentation here years ago. So there I am, using one of my squares to go and measure to make sure I've got the same on the left and the right. And it's not very thick. You don't have to have, that's probably just 3/8 inch hardboard is all that is. You don't need an awful lot. Anyways, there it is there. Okay, finishing. Well, yeah, I do a lot of finishing. I instruct spray finishing in Toronto on behalf of Fuji Spray. Canada's a very, very top tier manufacturer worldwide of turbine, HVLP, and now compressed air, HVLP, and mid-pressure guns as well. So they manufacture right in Toronto, and a great Canadian company. I've been associated with them for at least 8 years, really seriously, on a business relationship. And I really think the world of them. And I have every piece of equipment that they've ever produced, I've got a piece of it. Because I'll tell you right now, they give it to me. Whenever they're introducing something, they'll send me the machine before they put it into production. And I think there's perhaps others that they do this with as well, that they have a relationship with, and they'll say, can you give us a report on it? And so I bill them for the hours and the materials that I use, and I give them that report. And I just finished another test, and I'm sworn to secrecy about what I'm doing for them in regards to pre-production manufacturing advice and such. But I do teach, twice a year I'll teach an advanced course or as well a set of 1-day introductory spray finishing courses in Toronto. Okay, so what did I use? Well, the stain I used, and these are all Target Coatings products. Target Coatings, I had a good relationship going with them for a number of years. And again, they provide me free product for many, many years. And they no longer do that, and that's sad. I have to pay for it now. But anyways, so what I used is I used what's called NR 4000 stain, and it's a cherry color. And I played around with a bit. I put a little bit of dye in because I had to change the color of the stain that I use on the different woods, because African mahogany will take stain differently than cherry. So I did that. And before I threw the stain on it, I took sanding sealer and I watered it down so it was about a 25% of sealer and 75% tap water. And I shot that over all the parts that I was going to stain. And then and what that does is that seals the very open grain parts of the wood, but the other parts that are not as open grain, it almost doesn't put anything on them. And then I sand it really, really lightly. Before I apply the sanding sealer, I will go and sand it to P180. Okay, and P180 is about the same as 80 grit. After I've done that, then I'll sand it by hand using usually 400 grit or P400. And I'll use a machine to do that with the exception of small pieces. I do that by hand. Then I shoot the stain on it, and this is a wiping stain, so I'll spray it on with one of my spray guns, and then I'll let it soak in for a minute or two, and then I'll wipe it. And then I'll play around with that. So if I want more stain to stay on, then I'll leave it a little bit longer to soak in.
I'm surprised you sand it to equivalent 80, and then the next step is 400?
No.
Okay.
I started.
Okay.
Depending on the wood, like if I'm sanding veneer, like the edges, the two gables there, that was just a thin veneer. And so there was probably about more than a tenth of an inch, because it was shop-made veneer. And so anyways, I glued them all up, put them all in the press, et cetera, et cetera. Then after that, I went and sanded that by hand. I started, because it was raw wood, I started at about P80 and 80, 120, 150, and then 180. Okay? Did the same with everything. And then I put 4 coats of conversion varnish, which is a really durable varnish. And especially if I'm going to put it on the top of something where it may get water or such. Because my wife will put vases with flowers and stuff like that on it, so I had to make sure it was really well protected.
Your shop is in your basement, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
And doesn't that stuff smell a lot?
No, it's water-based.
Okay.
But still, it does have some salt. But I've got an explosion-proof fan in my spray booth. And I open a window at the other side of my shop, and I turn the fan on. It has about 500, it's close to 700 cubic feet a minute air movement, so it's hacking along. And I, of course, wear the necessary protective masks and such. Yes?
Yeah, as far as varnish goes, I'm a little bit confused by the word. Like,
Welcome to the club.
Okay, good. I see people talk about conversion varnish a lot, but whenever, because I'm kind of at the intro level to the game,
Yep.
I look around and see, you know, polyurethanes, different
Yep.
oils,
Right.
stuff like that.
What's
But
the difference?
yeah, I don't know if it's like I have to go to a Sherwin-Williams for like, you know, like a 2C poly you won't really see in like Home Depot. Is this one of those products that you have to kind of like travel to like a special spot to get it? Because I see it written about.
No, you can order this in anywhere.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's all available on the internet.
okay.
Target Coatings is sold in Canada by two main suppliers. There's one in Quebec and the other one's in Saskatchewan. The guy in Saskatchewan, which is called Wood Essence, he has an outlet in Ontario. So if I buy it from him, then it's shipped from the Toronto area. I don't know where their warehouse is exactly to me, so I save a bit on shipping and such. And the one in Quebec, I've not yet dealt with them. So, and they used to be a lot more expensive than the guy in Saskatchewan.
Right.
So, okay, so let me give you the real quick and dirty. I think we've got water-based products were first introduced, and then a waterborne product will contain some of the outfits, some of the oil-based product in it as a general rule of thumb. And these are just general statements. Yes, sir.
Are the properties of the water-based versus the urethane so different that you would choose one over the other, or is it kind of,
Okay, well, first
you
of
can
all,
do
there's,
anything with any
yeah,
of them?
there's water-based urethanes and there's solvent-based urethanes.
Sorry, yeah.
So like, yeah, so I'll just say this. Anybody here who owns a car that was manufactured off an assembly line in Europe or North America or anywhere in the world, your car has a water-based finish on it. It's not a solvent-based finish. Solvent-based finishes are used in some extremely rare instances, and there's reasons for that. But anyways, yeah, so everybody's converted over, and the reason they have is insurance. I mean, it's hard to have something catch fire when its base is water.
When you're in your shop, so you have a fan to throw the whatever outside.
Right. Most of it is captured by the filters before it even gets to the fan.
Okay, so you
And
you don't slowly but surely paint the house of your neighbor. No, but when
I
is it?
don't.
No, it's
No, I
not.
don't.
It's not an issue.
Okay, so there you can see the filter, and can you see the very back end up here? Right here?
Okay, yes.
That's a funnel, so the air goes up, it gets drawn into where the filter is, goes up through an area this wide and about 5 feet wide, gets up there, and my fan system, an explosion-proof fan, is right here. It's sandwiched between it. It's a tube that's about this big around, it's metal, and the fan is right in there, but the fan is supported by a pillar that goes down through the bottom of this drum, and that's where the pulley runs, and the motor's on the outside, so the motor's not in the airflow at all, which makes it explosion proof. And so the air just gets drawn down, and it goes around that curve and gets shot out the window, and the window has a baffle so it doesn't hit my neighbor's house. It actually goes between them. And I also have explosion proof lighting as well.
And, okay, now I'm being ignorant, why would it explode? Okay, I really
Well,
don't
because
know.
I shoot everything. I spray everything. I spray solvents, I spray alcohol-based, I spray everything there. Because remember, I worked for Target Coatings and they would have me do tests. I did tests with their competitors' products as well. Some of them might be oil-based or solvent-based or spirit. Yes, sir?
So this might be a strange question, but given that you stained both the mahogany and cherry to look
Yeah.
exactly alike,
Right?
why did you choose mahogany and not go with cherry?
Yeah, because
I
of
mean,
the
cherry has pretty,
chatoyance.
well, cherry, depending on what you get, can have pretty good chatoyance as well.
Yeah, but I
So-
wanted to have the African mahogany.
Just, you know, I'm looking at it, it's like they look exactly the same, so.
Yeah,
You do.
yeah.
You know.
And so here's a shot from the outside of my booth, and there you can see I've got my Fuji spray turbine on the outside so that it's not in the airflow and it's not going to be getting the filters contaminated. And on the opposite side there is my 60-gallon, 20 cubic feet a minute air compressor that also feeds compressed air into the shop because I use conventional guns also. Okay. And so challenges and solutions, having the doors fully inset. Remember I said I moved the front rails back. Applying the solid wood drawer handles, I think we've covered that. And staining to similar woods, adjusting the stain formula. I've had a lot of experience doing that, so I was able to do that myself. So any questions or comments? Yes, sir.
Did you have any trouble with alignment, or was it just standard, be very careful when you're making sure everything's squared up and everything? I'm just thinking of like the number of curves and everything that you had with the drawer fronts and the drawers, and having to align them with the, not only the sides, but also the,
Yeah.
The middle bit that you had.
Right, yeah.
Was that difficult? How did you manage it?
Okay, so my adage about measuring is you measure once really, really, really carefully and be confident. So purchase very expensive, high tolerance measuring tools only. Anything you've got that's cheap, or if you have two different, I don't use tape measures hardly at all, but if I was, I would make sure that all of them would be measuring the same amount. Rulers, when I buy a new ruler, I bring my old ruler with me. And not that one sterret is going to be better than the next sterret, you know, but manufacturing processes do change. And calipers, I have two different calipers. I've got a digital one and I've got an analog one. I prefer the analog because it shows me exactly what it is. The computer doesn't say, well, it's between this and this, so this is what it is. So that's just all that I'll say with that.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, because you can waste a lot of time measuring and you know, like just take a look at something and saying, okay, so I'm coming up with 130 millimeters and it's this big. Well, there's something wrong, you know, it's wrong. Yes, sir.
I just wanted to compliment your client, Marty. Going back to the color, 'cause when I look at that piece, which is gorgeous, by the way,
Thank you.
when I look at the lines, which are fairly drastic on the front,
Yeah.
if that's super dark, I think it would draw your eye towards it, and you'd miss a lot of the other curves that are.
Yeah, it could.
So it's just, it's got that kind of holistic look versus something I think that would draw your eye.
I'll make sure I do not pass that along. So you better know. Is there another question, sir? You had a question?
Just earlier, you mentioned P180 was the same as 80 grit?
No, no,
Could
no.
you- I didn't mishear.
P180 is the same as 80 grit. In the scale, you have two centers. The P series is European,
Right,
and Canada has adopted that primarily. The US uses standard grit size. And up to, from 0, you know, grit per inch, all the way up to approximately 400, they are virtually the same. And after 400, there is some difference between them. I seldom go beyond 600. Sometimes I'll go to 1,000.
but that's where I'm confused. You're saying.
So
80
180 is 180.
as
P180
okay.
or 180 are the same.
I was hearing 180 or 80,
Okay.
and that's why I was confused.
Okie dokie, good. Okay, well anyways, So that's my little company. I've re-registered it. I stood it down for a while, but then I thought, you know, man, the tax man's gonna start hating me and knocking on my door. So yes, and that's my email address, the.apex.woodworks. And I'm on Instagram as Apex Woodworks. And I'm really ticked off with Instagram lately. They've been controlling what I can actually say, and which really bothered me, because I think what happened, I got onto an American post that a person was talking about Trump, and I made a comment that was derogatory towards the former president. And I think somebody is, I
Or
think
you
a
mean
couple of them
accurate.
got together and they've said, you know, this guy's I don't know, he's making harassing things all the time. But anyways, there is it. So that's who I am. That's the presentation, and thank you very much for being an active participant.